Hi guys, so this is a video response to David Retro Games Played Badly, and he has asked a question which is name 10 games that you've discovered while collecting, presumably, you know, 10 games you love that you've discovered since you started collecting. And I thought, what a great question. Now, David's channel is linked in the description, head on down and check him out, great channel. And yeah, it's been a while since I did kind of an on-camera VR, but considering all this lockdown and everything, I thought I'd take the opportunity. Love doing these, and it's such a good question. It was really tough actually, so I kind of got thinking, which games am I going to show, because I've discovered so many games since collecting, it's unreal. So I thought immediately I'll limit it to games that are actually in the collection, because after all, the question is games you've discovered since collecting, so it should really be games I own. So immediately that knocks out a lot of the great games I've discovered on the PC Engine, because as you can see here, I went the EverDrive route for the PC Engine, and I have very few games. I've probably got 10-15 actual physical games for the PC Engine, so that kind of knocks out a whole load there. And then there's a lot of great games on the Vectrex, like I could pretty much name, you know, 10 great games on the Vectrex that I've discovered, but I think if I was going to name one, it'd be Vector Pilot, and I know Alex Nintendo Arcade showed that one, and I've shown it in a video recently, my top 10 games of the decade, so I kind of knocked out the Vectrex as well. So my list is going to be very Sega heavy, obviously, because the Sega stuff's like the heart of the collection here, really, and a lot of the Nintendo stuff that I do collect is stuff that I had a kid and I have nostalgia for and I want boxed. Otherwise I'll play them on my EverDrive on the SNES or whatever. But there are a couple of Nintendo games in here from the Japanese library. So yeah, like I said, very Sega heavy, a lot of Saturn stuff, because I never had a Saturn back in the day, never even played one, so the Saturn's been just this wealth of newness to me, loads of new games. So we'll start off with a Saturn game, and that is the fantastic Dodonpachi, and there's so many great shooters. I did think about showing Sokyu Gurentai, but I think that Dodonpachi is just my go-to shooter. So the great thing about the Saturn shooters is if you've got a spare 20 minutes, you don't have a load of time to put into a game, you can just jump on and give it a quick blast, and Dodonpachi is my go-to for that. It's just such a gorgeous game. I can put it on the Tate setup over there and just have a quick blast at it, and it's not too tough. It's enjoyable, even though I'm not great at shooters. It's a really enjoyable game. Just looks stunning, the graphics, the sound, everything absolutely perfect. And yeah, I'd recommend if you're gonna pick up a Saturn shooter, you can't go wrong with Dodonpachi. Now, the second game is a Mega Drive game, and yeah, I discovered quite a few Mega Drive games since collecting, but I think one of the highlights is one that I think David actually himself showed, and that is Comix Zone. And this is one that I never even encountered back in the day. Was it a late release? I don't think it was too late. Let's see if I can see, 95, so quite late. Probably by that time I was more heavily into other things and wasn't buying so many Mega Drive games, but this is awesome. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you are a comic book character and you're actually moving between the panels of the comic. So as you go from screen to screen, you're sort of climbing through or smashing your way through the sides of the panels and going into the next like frame of the comic. It's pretty tough, but it's just visually really unique. Such a great idea to be actually playing in a comic, and you get the story and the little speech bubbles and everything, and it's just a great game, great concept, and really good fun. Next up is a Nintendo one for all you Nintendo fans, and this is a game that is originally an arcade game that I absolutely love, and that is Knights of the Round. And this one I only have a cart copy. I think cart-only copies of this are going about 40 quid now, and the boxed one's well over 100, but I would like to nail down a boxed copy of this. So this is Super Famicom Japanese one, and yeah, it's a Capcom side-scrolling beat 'em up, and it is based on, you know, Arthur and the Round Table, hence the name Knights of the Round. So you can play as Arthur and I think Percival, and you know, some of his knights are some of the characters, and yeah, it's just great. It's a nice little twist, because I'm a huge fan of Capcom's arcade games, like you know, things like Alien vs Predator and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, and obviously Final Fight from back in the day, but never came across Knights of the Round, and yeah, had to add it to the Super Nintendo or Super Famicom collection, and it is a belter, that one. Dreamcast game. Now, I'll tell you exactly how I discovered this one. So back before, way before I did YouTube, so this is probably 7-8 years ago, I used to go to the Play Expos in Manchester with my mates, and before I knew all this, you know, this YouTube community existed even, and yeah, I was quite heavily into collecting back then, and I remember they had a Dreamcast set up, and I went over to play what was it? Oh yeah, it was Ikaruga. They had Ikaruga set up on this Dreamcast, and I remember at one point I for some reason I had to reset the game, and it booted up into a menu where you could select the game. So actually I then opened the console, and it wasn't an original copy of Ikaruga, it was like someone had burnt a few games onto one disc, and I saw this game on the options, Zero Gunner 2, and I thought, never heard of that, let's give it a go, and subsequently discovered my #1 favourite Dreamcast game. This game is so good. I just love it so much. I play it all the time. It's so much fun. It's got 7 difficulty levels, so even if you're shit, you can just put it on an easy one and you can play all the way through the game. If you want a challenge, you can ramp it up. I think 4 is the arcade standard kind of difficulty, so if you want to go higher than that, you can. You want to go lower, you can. But it's essentially it's like a, I want to say it's like a vertical shooter, but you can actually change your ship. Sometimes you're on like a horizontal plane or diagonal, and it kind of moves around. But it's got this weird control setup where it's a bit difficult to aim, so you use the buttons and the stick to actually aim your ship and turn, and while you're turning you can shoot. It's quite hard to explain, and it's fiddly once you know, at first, once you start using it, but when you get the hang of it, it's absolutely fantastic, and you're kind of turning and shooting on the fly, and you can fly around and like target specific areas of enemies, and you get these huge flashy bosses. Brilliant boss music, so when the bosses come up, they'll come up as like you know, there'll be a boat or a ship or a train or something, and then once you've defeated them once, they then transform into like a robot, so it's like Transformers, and then you have to defeat the robot version of them. It's so good. The music's good, everything's great. It's Japanese exclusive, and very luckily, back when I first discovered it at the Play Expo, as soon as I got home, I went on eBay and I bought a copy for about 45 quid. I think it'll cost you well over 100 quid now, but yeah, can't recommend this game enough. Absolutely my favourite Dreamcast game, and very happy to have discovered it. Next up is another Saturn game, and another one that started out at the arcades. So this came to the arcades around the probably early to mid 90s, and then it didn't come to Saturn until 99, and it was another Japanese exclusive, and that is Dungeons and Dragons. So we got the box set with the RAM pack here, really nice nick. This is another one that I managed to snag for a good price years ago, and has subsequently gone up a lot. So this is 2 games. So this is Tower of Doom and Shadow over Mystara, I think it's called. So it's the 2 Dungeons and Dragons arcade games that were released by Capcom in the early 90s, and then they were released as a pack on Saturn. Now, another example of some great side-scrolling beat-em-ups that I never knew of from Capcom back in the day. and this one kind of mixes things up even more. So it's very similar to Knights of the Round in that it's got a kind of fantasy theme, but this has RPG elements, so it chucks in, like, you know, different types of magic and items and all this, and like leveling up stuff, and yeah, it's really interesting, but it's just a belter. They're both fantastic. I do prefer one of them over the other, but I can never remember which one it is that I prefer. But yeah, I mean, either that, what I've just explained, appeals to you, or it doesn't. It's like a Capcom side-scrolling beat 'em up based around, you know, Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of theme, that fantasy kind of world and magic and everything. But yeah, it's a win for me. It's absolutely fantastic. Definitely one to check out on MAME if you can't grab the Saturn version. Right, next one, I'm kind of gonna cheat and say 2 games because it's kind of a series, and I never ever played this series back in the day. So that is the Rival Schools series. So we've got Rival Schools United by Fate on the original PlayStation, and then we've got Rival Schools 2 Project Justice on the Dreamcast. Now these games are very similar to Street Fighter EX plus Alpha. So if you've ever played Street Fighter EX at the arcade or EX plus Alpha on the PlayStation, it's like a Capcom beat 'em up, a Capcom versus fighter, but you have kind of 3D sprites and 3D environments, although it still plays very much like a 2D fighter. Graphically it's 3D. And Rival Schools is very similar, and it's based on, I think it's a rival, I don't know if it says on here, but it's a Rival Schools anime or something that was from Japan, which I've never seen, but it was literally about rival schools. So like kids from different schools would, you know, be rivals and presumably get in scraps or whatever. But yeah, it's it says here 14 brand new warriors, blah 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 blah, 3D tag team battle. So yeah, and then the sequel is great, Project Justice on the Dreamcast. So essentially you just pick a school, which will be a team of 3 kids, and then you just scrap it out like tag team, 3 against 3. Kind of like how Marvel vs. Capcom series works in that it's 3 on 3. But yeah, just fantastic, works really well, it's great. Despite being 3D, which a lot of people don't like, I think it works really, really well. I love Street Fighter EX anyway, but yeah, never heard of this series before I started collecting and absolutely love it. Next one, another Saturn game, and this one is actually a PAL one for once, and that is Guardian Heroes. So this was developed by Treasure, probably around 95, I'd imagine. It says copyright 94, so maybe 94. But yeah, it's like a huge side-scrolling beat 'em up, again with RPG elements. So this one adds RPG elements where you can level up your character as you go. Quite a good range of characters. You can use the multi-tap to play this with like 6 players, I think, at once. But the other interesting thing, despite apart from it just adding the RPG elements, is it has 3 different planes. So going from the foreground to the background, you can jump between them. So you can jump into the background and there'll be enemies on the different planes, and you can sort of jump between them and get in scraps. But it's hard to describe graphically. Presumably you'll see, I'll put some footage up there anyway, but it looks gorgeous now. Like if you think of the mid-90s games where it was heavily emphasizing on 3D graphics, and Treasure were at the time really sort of keen to use 2D. They were heavily into 2D, and it was what they knew and what they knew they could do well. And yeah, they produced Guardian Heroes, which now looks fantastic, whereas a lot of the games from the mid-90s that did use 3D graphics look terrible. So it's aged very, very well. Still a fantastic game. It's fantastic all round. It's Treasure, so you know, a good pedigree there. You know you're going to get something good with Treasure, and Guardian Heroes is undoubtedly one of their best games. Fantastic. Another Nintendo game. Now I remember how I discovered this one as well. So this is going back, blimey, this is a few houses ago. So this would have been about 8 years ago as well, at least. And I went to buy something off a guy locally, and it was a JTAG Xbox 360. And I went around his house and he had loads of stuff for sale, and he had this game. And I remember thinking, I want that game. I'd heard all about this since collecting and just hadn't come across it. And it is Sin and Punishment on the Nintendo 64. And yeah, I think he sold it to me for about 40 quid. I don't know what it goes for now, but it's lovely nick. It's in a box protector there, but it is in really nice nick. But it's a Japanese exclusive, another Treasure game. This is developed by Treasure, and it was this is well into their sort of 3D phase. It's very 3D. Obviously, being N64, you'd expect 3D, but I think their first game on the N64 was 2D. I'm trying to think what that was. Was it Mischief Makers maybe? But yeah, Sin and Punishment is just gorgeous, great music, and it is it's an on-rail shooter. So think on-rail shooter, kind of like you know, Time Crisis or House of the Dead or whatever, but it's a bit different. You're controlling a character in third person, and there's this weird plot where I think they're breeding animals to eat, and then the animals rebel and start taking over the world or something. It's all very weird, but yeah, you're part of this team that has to take them on, and yeah, it's hard to explain, but it's just great. It's just such a great take on the on-rail shooter format, and it's really unique, and it's just amazing. It's such a shame that this didn't leave Japan and come to the West, but it's definitely one to import. If you own an N64 and you're thinking about doing importing, you know, the Japanese titles, this should be top of your list. It's absolutely amazing, and another example of Treasure just smashing it. Okay, and then my 10th game, last one of the list, and that is a Mega Drive game. So, I mean, yeah, that's the second Mega Drive game. Like I said, there's loads of Mega Drive games I've discovered, but these two kind of stood out when I looked on the shelf, and that is Shinobi 3. And Shinobi 3 completely passed me by back in the day. This is, it says 93, was it as early as that? I mean, it surprises me if that came out in 93 that it passed me by. But I had Revenge of Shinobi back in the day, and I played Shadow Dancer back in the day, and I really liked them. But Shinobi 3 is just like the definitive Shinobi experience on the console, and it kind of switched things up a bit. So Shinobi 3 speeded the pace up a bit. It's a bit of a pacier game. There's less, you know, there's less mucking about. It's like more action. So yeah, it just makes the whole game a lot more of a smooth experience. It's a lot smoother to play. It's a lot more enjoyable to play, and it looks fantastic. Music's great. Everything's great about it. It's just fantastic, and it's a shame that when a lot of people think of Shinobi, they think of Revenge of Shinobi. And I recently did a poll on Galaxy Sega that what are people's top 10 Mega Drive games, and Revenge of Shinobi was in there, and I remember thinking, you know, Shinobi 3 is like infinitely better than Revenge of Shinobi. Although there's that nostalgia factor, you can't deny if you've played Shinobi 3 that it's definitely the best Shinobi experience on the console. But yeah, like I said, I'd never heard of that before. Well, I'd never sort of played it. I think I may have heard of it, but never come across it before collecting. Okay, so I just went to edit this, and I realised that that was just 9 games, because I kind of counted the Rival Schools games as one entry. So I'm going to show another Dreamcast game, and that is a Japanese exclusive, and again it was an arcade game that came to the Dreamcast, and that is Cosmic Smash, and that's quite a late release from Japan. So it says 2000 on there. In which case it's not a late release, so I just assumed it was late because of the DVD style case. So a lot of the late releases like Trigger Heart, Exelica, Under Defeat, stuff like that, all came in these DVD cases, so they switched from the dual case design. So obviously this may have been one of the first DVD case style games from Japan, but yeah, Cosmic Smash, it is it's a weird one. It's kind of like half between the block breaking games like Breakout and Arkanoid, and then mixed with squash. So you're in like a 3D grid room, and it's like you're a squash player and you have to just whack the ball with your racket and hit the blocks, and then you have to just eliminate the blocks within a certain time. And it's really simple and it's quite easy, but it's really good fun. It's a really unique kind of take on that block breaking genre, and yeah, really cool game. So yeah, that was my 10 games discovered since collecting, and I know a few other people have done VRs to this, so if I can find them and remember, I will leave links to them as well as David's original video in the description, so go and check them out, go and check David out. Got a great channel, go and chuck him a sub, give him some support. But yeah, thanks for watching guys, see ya.